Welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Jeevan Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Public Policy, Law and Governance, Central University of Rajasthan. Today, we are going to learn about a concept in public administration called span of control in the course Public Administration and Introduction. The objectives of this module are to understand the meaning of the concept of span of control, to discuss the types of and factors of span of control, and to examine the Gracuna's formula of span of control. The lesson is divided into the following. First, we will discuss the evolution of the concept of span of control and the meaning and definitions of span of control, types of span of control, delayering the process, factors affecting span of control, Gracuna's formula, and advantages of span of control. Students, in the discipline of public administration, span of control is very important. Though it has been considered to be a general principle in public administration, it is very controversial because it is argued that it provides a frame of reference than a general principle itself. However, the study of the concept of span of control is essential to understand how organizations work in the 21st century. Now let us look at the evolution. The concept of span of control was developed by Hamilton in the United Kingdom in 1922. What is the assumption behind the evolution? The assumption behind this evolution is that a superior or a boss cannot supervise more than a particular number of persons in an organization because the energies, time and costs that involved in supervision are very limited. Therefore, the span of control is essential. And this evolution can be traced to the army, where in British it was found that a superior officer is not able to supervise more than a particular number of army officers in that. That is how the span of control, in other words, the span of attention is very limited. So from this evolution we see how many subordinates a superior can supervise given the framework of limited time and energy and attention. This supervision or span of control, in other words, is a span of attention of a superior over the subordinates. And in the process, the superior tends to develop certain relationships. Those relationships can be personal or a group or cross relations. So this is how we see that the concept of span of control can be traced to the army. Students, let us go to now the definitions of different scholars on span of control. To begin with, DeMark defined span of control as the number and range of direct, habitual communication contacts between the chief executive of an enterprise and his principal fellow officers. What does it mean? It means that the officer, the superior officer, tends to develop communications with the subordinates in a particular organization over a period of years. And how many that he or she supervises the subordinates indicates the span of control. Now let us move on to another definition given by Lois Allen. To him, span of control is the number of people that a manager can supervise. The definition is self-explanatory. And we also have another scholar who is Longenecker, who defines span of control as the number of immediate subordinates reporting to a given manager. What we can see from all this definition is that this concept has a managerial perspective. To put it simple, a manager supervises or a manager manages a limited number of subordinates. And we also will see some other definitions given by the other scholars. Peterson and Plowman defines span of control as the following. It refers to the maximum number of subordinates which may be placed under the jurisdiction of one executive immediately superior to them. What we see here in this entire concept is that in the span of control, we need to understand that there is one superior and there are some number of subordinate. So, superior and subordinates are the central focus of all these definitions. And Elliot Jacques also has a different point of view, who says that a manager may have to supervise as many immediate subordinates that he can know personally, in the sense that he can assess personal effectiveness. Let us see what he means by that. He means that a boss or a superior will have a personal relationship with his or her subordinate in order to assess the effectiveness of the subordinate's functioning. So, the span of control is not just a supervision, it is also a framework to assess the performance of a subordinate and his or her effectiveness. And we will see the last definition given by Hyman and Scott, who define that span of control is the number of subordinates who can be effectively supervised and managed. So, the concept of span of control revolves around superior and subordinate, the relationship between both, sometimes the relationship between the subordinate themselves as a group or individual or cross relations that we need to take note of. Dear students, let us try to understand this concept in simple terms. The span of control can be understood as the extent to which a superior can supervise his or her subordinates, or the powers or the extent of the powers that he or she uses over the subordinates. The span of control involves the assessment of performance of subordinates and the costs that are attached to it, because higher the span of control or wider the span of control, lesser the costs, and narrower the span of control, higher will be the costs. So, the span of control will have an implications in terms of efficiency of that organizations, in terms of time, cost and energy. Now, we move on to the types of span of control. Types of span of control can be divided into two. One is wider span of control, then narrow span of control. Before we move, let me give an example. A superior has two subordinates. Then what is the span of control? The span of control is 2. If the superior has 4 subordinates, what is his or her span of control? It is 4. So, it depends on how many subordinates a superior has. Depending on that, we divide whether it is small or wider span of control. In other words, the number of subordinates determines the types of subordinates. Now let us look at wide span of control. What does it mean? Wide span of control means a manager can supervise a large number of subordinates in a given time. In 21st century, the organizations are moving towards this kind of wider span of control. We are going to see how that will take place in a few moments. There are certain advantages of this particular wider span of control. The wider span of control leads to the flatter organizations in the sense that there are lower levels of command or lower levels of chains. Therefore, it leads to the avoiding of cost and time, because the hierarchies that are involved in narrow span of control can be minimized. So, wider span of control is useful for running a flat organizations with less number of hierarchies. So, what are the advantages of this kind of wider span of control? The first one is it leads to maximized communications. What does it imply? It implies that if a boss or a superior has large number of subordinates under him or her, then it is easy for him or her to communicate effectively to all these subordinates, because the command is coming from a single subordinates. The levels of the levels of hierarchy are few. So, the command goes very clearly to all the subordinates and it reaches very faster compared to the narrow span of control. The second advantage is it leads to a better supervision. How? It leads to a better supervision because the boss will have a direct contact with the subordinates in different ways by using internet, telephonic conversations, etc., etc. So, this is how it can lead to a flat organizations. There will not be any confusion over the channels of communications, because the unity of command is very clear in that particular organizations, because the boss is clearly identified. The subordinates know from where the communication is coming. As a result, what happens? It leads to better coordination, because all the subordinates are with that particular superior. So, it is easy to coordinate among them. This kind of supervision or span of control is useful when the organizations are long established. Imagine a university has been established for about 25 years and it is well established in terms of the procedures and processes. Therefore, every subordinate knows what he or she has to perform, and with lesser number of the managers, whether it is higher managers or middle managers, the lower rungs of administrators know what they have to perform in the organizations. So, when routine tasks, jobs are involved, wider span of control is possible. And it also leads to have a prompt and quick response from the employees to a particular situations or a particular command from the managers or the superiors. In the whole process, what will happen to the cost and time in running the particular organization is this: it leads to the lower overhead costs of running the particular organizations. The wider span of control also leads to the responding to the environmental changes. How? As I discussed earlier, in the flat organizations, due to wider span of control, the command coming from the superiors is easier. Therefore, the subordinates are communicated very clearly about the decisions that are taken at the top level. In case the organization needs to respond in emergencies and the changes that are taking place at global or nation levels, it is easier for the organization to adapt to those environmental changes and cope up with the challenges that are coming, because the levels of bureaucracy will be few compared to the span of control. Then there is also another advantage, is that the supervision of the subordinate becomes easier when we have a people who are very competent in that particular organizations, and when lower supervision is required, because an organization is well settled and lower supervision is required compared to the newly established organizations. These are some of the advantages of having a wider span of control. Now let us look at the second type of the span of control, that is narrow span of control. What is the narrow span of control? The narrow span of control is the one where a superior will have middle level managers, where the number of subordinates are more. Compared to the wider span of control, here we have large number of hierarchies, large number of layers of administration, because at each level you need somebody who can supervise. This is called narrow span of control. I give an example. If a subordinate has 2 managers and that 2 manager has 5 managers, like that, if you keep on going, then the command levels are increasing, because a single person, a superior, cannot supervise large number of subordinates like in the wider span of control. And here the narrow span of control will increase large number of layers in management, therefore making that organizations very tall. Unlike in wide span of control, which is conducive to the flat organizations, here in the narrow span of control you have taller organizations. And let us look at what are the advantages and disadvantages of this particular span of control. The first advantage comes with specialization. As the narrow span of control allows a close supervision, it is possible for achieving the perfection at the work, and specialization is possible with that. When the tasks are very difficult to be performed, we need a closer supervision, in other words narrow span of control, where tight supervision is required. Narrow span of control is useful. And there are also certain disadvantages with this kind of control. What are they? It's very difficult to achieve coordination, because the moment a superior releases an order or give a command, it takes a long time to reach to the subordinates. So therefore, coordinating all the subordinates is very difficult. In the process, the communication may be distorted. Unlike in wide span of control, reaching the communication or sending the communication becomes difficult. And there will be a lot of communication gaps between the superior and subordinates. Sometimes it may also lead to confusion among the subordinates also. And more importantly, it may lead to the overhead cost of running an organization, because you have large number of employees who carry communication from one level to another, from top to middle to lower levels. And this kind of supervision will not allow to adopt an organization to the changes that are taking place in the environment in terms of administrative responses. Why? The organization is not flat, rather it is very tall. These are some of the features of the second type of control, that is called narrow span of control. So far we have tried to understand the meaning and definitions of span of control and also types of span of control. Having discussed that, we will try to understand another concept related to this span of control, that is called delayering. Delayering is a process related to the span of control. As we have seen in the narrow span of control, the number of layers in administrations are so many, which leads to overhead cost, which is time consuming, which distorts communication. So attempts are made globally to delayer, that means reduce the number of layers between the superior and subordinates. Particularly the focus is laid on reducing the middle level managers. This process is called delayering, because delayering helps to improve the communication between superior and subordinate. It also saves time and cost. Now we will try to understand what are the factors that affect span of control. The span of control are affected by the following. The first one is ability of the subordinates. When the subordinates are in a position to understand their work and their roles, it is easy to have wider span of control. And the second one is the degree of delegations. If subordinates are given more freedom to work, that is possible for a superior to have wider span of the control. And the third one is the capability of the supervisor. If the superior is having leadership qualities, it is easy for him or to her to supervise a large number of subordinates. Then the other factor is the age of the organization. As I discussed earlier, that if an organization is old, which is having well-established procedures, then it is easy to have higher or wider span of the control. It also depends upon the nature of works. If they are routine, it is easy to have wider span of the control. The other factor is geographic dispersion. If all the offices are located in a particular building, it is easier for the boss to communicate and coordinate. So if the place is compact, the communication becomes easier. Then the other one is, it also depends on the techniques that were used by a particular boss in terms of supervision, planning, programming, specialists that are available in a particular organizations. If the specialists are there in an organization, it is easier for organization to continue a particular task. And the next one is communication system. If an organization has well-built communication systems where subordinates receive information from time to time, it is easier to have a larger span of control. And it also depends on the planning that is made by the managers. We need to emphasize here on information communication technologies in the 21st century. With the use of ICTs, the automation in our administrative organization has increased leaps and bounds. With a single email, it is easier to communicate to thousands of employees in a particular organization. The pace at which an organization uses these ICTs for communication also improves the span of control. It is possible to have wider span of control. This is in the Indian context. It was also tried way back in 1990s, where the ICTs have been given a lot of importance to improve administrative responses in terms of delivering goods and services. And in modern times also, we see that National E-Governance Plan also emphasizes using automation of services. And the last one also depends upon the level of manager. If the boss is higher in the organization, it is leading to a narrow span of control. Newman has proposed that it is better to have fewer number of subordinates in an organization to have an effective control. So this leads us to look at the formula that is proposed by V.A. Grakunas in subsequent discussion. Now we'll look at an important administration scholar and a management scholar, V.A. Grakunas, who proposed a formula to understand the number of subordinates and the number of superior that an organization should have. In other words, he tries to see what is the ideal number for an organization to have a superior and subordinates. How many a superior can supervise at a point of time? He analyzed it in terms of mathematical formulas that we are going to see. And his formula is this. In an organization, as the number of subordinates increases arithmetically, the number of relationships increase geometrically. Having seen the formula proposed by V.A. Grakunas, let us see how it works with reference to examples. Look at the picture and we see here there are three kinds of relationships that are emerging. If M is superior, S1 and S2 are subordinates. What are the possible relationships here? Direct single relationship, direct group relationship, and cross relationship. Let me explain here what is the direct single relationship. The direct single relationship here is M with S1, M with S2. This is a direct relationship between the superior and subordinates. And the second type of relationship is direct group relationship. What is it that? M will have a relationship with S1 in the presence of S2, and also M will have a relationship with S2 in the presence of S1. This is what is called direct group relationship. Students, we need to pay little attention to this third kind of relationship that is called cross relationship. Look at the diagram. In the picture, we see M is a superior, S1, S2, S3 or his or her subordinates. In this kind of relationship, we have relationship between the subordinates and also relationship between subordinates and the superior. So this is called cross relationship. For example, S1 S2 or S1 S3, S2 S3, S1 S3, like this. You keep on increasing here. So according to the formula that is proposed here, Greikona came up with a formula that is called Greikona's formula of span of control. See the picture. The formula is this: R is equal to N 2N by 2 plus N minus 1. Here R refers to the total number of relationships and N refers to the number of subordinates who are reporting directly to the superior. Let us apply it for our understanding. If number of subordinates are 3, the possible relationship that we are going to have are 18. And if it is 4, they are going to be 44. If it is 5, then 100 relationship. If it is 6, the relationships are 223. It goes on like that. And then we may ask here, is there an ideal number for a subordinate? He proposes that it is better to have subordinates between 5 to 6 subordinates at higher level. Having applied this formula, we will see here that the number of subordinates a higher level should be 5 or 6, while at the lower level the number of subordinates should be 20. This is an ideal number that is given by Greikona. Like every theory has its own limitation, Greikona's formula also has some limitation. What is it that? You try to give more emphasis on figures. At the same time, he also has given a lot of emphasis on relationship. So far, we have discussed the meaning of span of control, definitions given by different scholars, types of span of control, and factors affecting span of control. Now let us look at some of the advantages of the span of control. They are the following. Span of control increases efficiency. It depends upon number of the subordinates that a superior has. It facilitates effective supervision and control. It is possible to develop a team spirit with an effective span of control. It results in quick action from the subordinates. It is easier for an organization to respond to the environmental changes. This also leads to a mutual trust between superior and subordinates. Ultimately, it leads to the effective supervision of subordinates by the superior. Now, I am going to summarize the entire lesson. We began our understanding with the need to understand the concept of span of control, because the span of control will have ramifications in terms of effectiveness of running an organization. An organization can be taller or flat depending upon the span of control. The span of control is the extent to which a superior can supervise his or her subordinates. Span of control is a managerial principle. Span of control are two, one wider and narrower span. And the factors that are affecting it are the communication system, nature of the work, and nature of the leadership, etc., etc. And we also have seen the formula proposed by Graconas by using mathematical formulas. He tried to come up with the ideal number of the subordinates at both higher level and the lower level. I hope you understood the lesson. For further details, you look at the text and also web resources. Thank you.